guys, it's Abby. I'm back with another video, and today I will be doing the book Courtship Tag. I was tagged by Roya Eve Reads, so thank you so much for tagging me. And I don't know, let's just get right into it. I really think this is going to be a fun tag. Now, the way that this tag works is broken into phases, so like the courtship phases. So phase 1 is initial attraction, a book that you bought because of the cover. For this one, I will be going with I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I know a lot of people love the hardback cover version of this, and I do think that is a really beautiful cover, but I was always hesitant to buy that version because it is a lot larger, a lot more expensive. And I saw this in the bookstore and I was immediately intrigued because I've never seen a cover that has a quote just blatantly on it and the title like this, and at first I had no idea that it was like I'll Give You the Sun. So I thought that was really interesting, and you open it up and it has like, you know, the original cover, but I just loved this simplistic cover with the quote on it. I don't know, it really drew me in. That's something that I'm really interested in and something that I would look for in a book regardless of if it was I'll Give You the Sun, so this is definitely one that I bought purely because of the cover. Phase 2 is First Impressions, a book that you got because of the summary. This one is a book that I talk about a lot, and that is The Love That Split the World by Emily Henry. I promise I'll shut up about this book, but it's just so true because before this book was even out, I saw the summary on Goodreads and I was so excited about it, and I immediately was like, alright, this is going on my most anticipated reads of 2016. I could not wait. Just over the summary, I didn't know anything about the author. I mean, the cover's gorgeous too, but the thing that really pulled me in was the summary of it. I mean, it was all over the title, the cover, the everything, but it was the summary that made me really want to read it because it, you know, had a lot of like keywords for me, like the Native American tales, the magical realism, all this different stuff. So I was really excited about this one when I read the summary. Phase 3 is Sweet Talk, a book with great writing. For this one, I'm going to go with the book that everybody knows, and that is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I mean, no, despite the hype, despite the movie, despite everything about this book, John Green's writing is impeccable. No one could tell me otherwise. This will always be in my top 3 favorite books of all time, just because I loved this book so much when I read it, and I've read it several times, and I'm not a rereader, and every time you find something different in John Green's writing, and I just appreciate his work immensely. I've read all of his books, and they're all really well written. The Fault in Our Stars was always my favorite, and that's just because it's written in such a raw and natural way that you're like, it's just unbelievable. John Green's writing is just unbelievable, and like the quotes you can find in this book. I have marked this book up to no end. Oh, you can't even see. Just quotes and quotes and quotes and all this different writing, and he writes dialogue perfectly, and I'm struggling here. And this is just a really well-written book, and that's something that's really important to me because I love my books to be lyrical and make me have that little, like, you know, your heart, like, it does that little thing when you read something really good, you know? And that's mainly what I look for in books, and this one does it for me. Phase 4 is First Date, a book or a series that made you want to pursue the rest of the series. I had kind of a tiebreaker for this one. I was going to choose The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater because I absolutely love that book. I don't have it with me, I loaned it out to a friend, but oh, that book really, really made me want to keep going. But then I thought that there's one that, like, as soon as I finished it, I was literally desperate for the other one, and that is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Everyone, I feel like, kind of felt that way when they finished Cinder, that like immediately they needed the next one, just because this one is like setting up for this like wonderfulness that is to come, and you can just feel it, and you're like, no, like I want more as soon as you close it. So I immediately ordered Scarlet like as soon as I finished this one, I remember, and I like immediately started reading it. So I pick Cinder. I am heating up in here because my vent is down here and I have the heat blasting because for some reason it is like 30 degrees outside and it was snowing this morning, and it's just ridiculous. Phase 5, Late Night Phone Calls, a book that kept you up reading all night long. So this one that immediately comes to mind I don't have with me, and that is The Retribution of Mara Dyer. It is the second book in the Unbecoming of Mara Dyer series, Mara, whatever. And oh my god, I remember this was a couple years ago, I was in high school and it was like 3 a.m. and I had school the next day and I was finishing the last pages. And you know, if you've read this series, you know what happens on the last pages of the Retribution Mara Dyer. Like, I could not put it down. And then I closed the book and I was just like shell-shocked. I didn't even know what to do with myself. I was so upset. I immediately like pulled up my laptop or my phone and I was like, when's the next one coming out? And it was like 2 years and I just was like crying and I was just having a huge moment. And I mean, it's been a while since I've stayed up until 3 a.m. to read a book. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's been a long time since a book has like made me disregard everything I have the next day and just read it all through the night. And so that is probably the last time that I did that, honestly. And that book just did it for me. Phase 6, Always on My Mind. A book that you could not stop thinking about. For this one, I am going to say Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This book is beautiful and I really suggest that everybody read it because it talks about things that you don't necessarily learn in school. This book follows a girl named Lena and she lives in Lithuania with her family, and this takes place during World War II, and it's all about the movement of the families in Lithuania. So they moved her family from Lithuania on these buses and trains and things like that, and they moved them to Russia, and then from Russia to the North Pole. And it's just this thing that we don't learn about in school, is how the Soviets took these people and tried to hide that they had these people, especially when the United States got involved. And you follow Lena through this journey to these concentration camps and through this really, really eye-opening and shocking experience, and you can tell that the author put so much love and care and research into this because it feels so real. And if you have read, I know a lot of people read this for school, is Night by Elie Wiesel. I read that in 8th grade, I think, for school, and it was super eye-opening because it talks about a man who survived the concentration camps in Nazi-occupied Germany, and it is a true story, and all of it is told completely through the experiences that he had. And honestly, the way that this story was told reminds me of Night. Even though this is a fictional story, the way it's told, it feels so real, and I had to remind myself that these characters weren't necessarily real. But I was reading in the back, in the acknowledgements, and Ruta Sepetys got a lot of first-hand accounts from survivors from these concentration camps and from this journey from Lithuania to the North Pole. And a lot of the things that happened in this book are actually things that happened, and it is just so beautiful, and I could not stop thinking about it after I read it because it just kind of, I closed the book and I was like, holy crap, like, this is real, this happened, and people hid it, and nobody knew about it, and I've gone 19 years of my life without knowing that this was a thing, and it was just ridiculous, and it's really sad. So this is a book that has definitely stuck with me, as even now after reading it like 2 weeks ago. Phase 7, Getting Physical, a book which you love the way it feels. I felt like this was kind of a silly question, but then I thought about it and I'm like, there are a lot of books that I just like love to touch. This one I have We All Looked Up by, where's his name? Tommy Wallace. And this book is kind of like this like suede material, you know, and it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's kind of like if you have the fifth wave, it's kind of like that same consistency without like the shininess of like where the sun is, but where all this like black part is. It's kind of the same consistency as that. So I just really like the way it feels, and I think it adds like a cool like ambiance to the cover of both of the books that I just showed. I really like this like texture, I guess. I don't even know if this counts. This may just be like regular. I'm not sure, but I like the way this book feels in my hands. Phase 8, Meeting the Parents, a book which you would recommend to your friends and family. For this one, I thought kind of hard because I feel like everybody is different. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the same books to all of the same people. One that I thought is pretty universal is one that I actually read for a Gothic literature class that I took last semester? One of these past semesters, and that is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Never heard of this book, but I knew that I saw the cover, so I was like not sure where I had seen this book before. And I was kind of surprised that we were reading it because I found it was like a young adult fiction, so I was like, interesting that we're reading it for a class, but we also read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, so I think they were kind of sticking with that. But this book was really, really cool and really well written, and I think super interesting. It is historical fiction, and it's kind of hard to explain, but it follows a girl who, it's hard to explain. Okay, there's this author, and she writes all these books, but none of them are ever true, and she finally wants to explain, like, her true story, so she gets this girl who, like, writes people's stories down. I can't remember what it's called, and she writes down this woman's story, and it's kind of, like, ghosts and gothic, and then there's this big mansion, and, you know, this huge creepy family, and it is very, very cool, and it is a kind of a book that had me guessing until the end, and I thought it was really interesting and intriguing, and so I think I would recommend it to especially, like, family and friends, because it's kind of a universal book. I feel like a lot of people would enjoy it because it's different than most books. I've never read a book that was like this, and I think people would really enjoy it because it's historical fiction, because it takes place in the past, but it is also kind of like paranormal because there are, like, these ghosts, you think, or maybe they're crazy, so it's psychological. And I feel like everybody would have a different take on this book, and I'd really be interested to hear what my family and friends would think about this. Phase 9, Thinking About the Future. A book or series that you know that you'll read many times in the future. For this one, I have On Writing by Stephen King. I have already read this book twice, I believe. I think it was twice. It was once or twice. I'm pretty sure I, like, skimmed it the second time. But this is not only a memoir by Stephen King, so it tells you kind of about his life, but it is also about his writing process, his tips, and about the craft, you know, a memoir of the craft. And I really, really loved reading this book. I am not a huge Stephen King fan. I haven't read any of his other books, which might make this seem kind of redundant, but he is an extremely successful author, and I wanted some insight on how he got to where he was, and, you know, what was it like growing up, and he goes through his whole life, which I thought that the most interesting thing about this book was that it's half memoir, half tips and tricks and stuff, because you get to hear about his life, and then he tells you, like, editing tricks, and then he'll, like, show you how he edits, which I think is really interesting. And I remember reading this in high school, and I really enjoyed it. It really helped me with my writing. If you're a writer, I really suggest reading this, because even if you're not a huge fan of Stephen King's particular writing himself, he does not specify on the type of stuff that he writes, and there are still things that I remind myself of that I learned from this book. And I want to read it again and again, because my craft and my writing will always be changing, and so the things I take from this book will always be changing. And I do kind of start to forget as the time has gone on. There aren't a lot of things I remember from this book, so I know that I will reread it. And this is one of the only writing books that I own, just because I find a lot of them can be so dry and boring. And I kind of, if you're going to teach me how to write, I want to read good writing, not dry and boring and, like, drags on and, like, just like a textbook. I want something interesting, and I found this really interesting. And that's coming from someone who does not enjoy reading memoirs and nonfiction very much. 10. Share the Love. Who would you like to tag? For this one, I really don't know who's done this tag and who hasn't. So I tag anybody who's watching this, but I'll also tag, let me just think of people off the top of my head. For this, I will tag Litter Abby, Elena Reeds, and Alibaba Day Books. So those are just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head. If you've already done this or already been tagged, I'm sorry, I don't know, do it again or don't do it, I don't really care. I tag everybody who watches this, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I really liked this tag. I'm kind of picky about what tags I do, so I thought this one was really fun and not hard to think of answers at all. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.